This is a Federal News Network podcast.
The Social Security Administration says it overpaid about 2 million beneficiaries over the past 2 years. The agency's top leader says that's a small fraction of its overall payments, but SSA says part of the problem is that the agency has its smallest workforce in decades. Meanwhile, it's providing benefits for a record number of Americans each year. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman has more for us. Jory, how are we today?
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for context, how do these overpayments fit in overall with how much SSA pays in benefits every year?
Yeah, some important context here, Eric. SSA says that these overpayments, these 2 million overpayments over 2 years, that they are a small fraction of what the agency pays out overall. They have been paying out benefits these days to a record 71 million Americans, and the overpayments account for about half of 1% for Social Security payments and about 8% of supplemental security income payments for those individuals who are getting SSA payments through the disability side of the agency. And so we heard from acting SSA Commissioner Kololo Kijakazi. She told members of the House Ways and Means Committee that this, again, is just a small fraction of what SSA is paying out, and that these overpayments, while unfortunate, are a drop in the bucket, so to speak.
SSA's employees work assiduously to pay the right person the right amount at the right time, and as a result, we have achieved low overpayment rates.
And that is acting SSA Commissioner Kololo Kijakazi.
All right, so what is SSA going to do to recoup those overpayments? Are they going to start sending notices out to folks who got too much money?
Yeah, well, unfortunately for them, that is the case. SSA has begun mailing out these notices to these beneficiaries that SSA believes have been overpaid, and in that mailing, they are requesting a full and immediate refund. And to recoup these funds, SSA is telling beneficiaries that it's proposing withholding a percentage of future benefit payments until they have settled that overpayment. Now, of course, beneficiaries have the option to appeal that decision if they think that, in fact, they have not been overpaid, or to propose a different rate of withholding from what SSA has proposed. And Kijakazi recognizes that this may put some beneficiaries in a bind, that they may not have the means to immediately pay those overpayments back. But she says that SSA is required by law to try and recover these overpayments.
I understand that receiving an overpayment notice can be distressing for beneficiaries. We seek to balance compassion with our statutory obligation to seek recovery and carefully review Social Security trust funds.
Yes, you can say that again. We're speaking with Federal News Network's Jory Heckman. All right, so what is the state of the SSA workforce? If they have that small workforce, how is that factoring into their effort to recoup some of these payments?
It definitely factors into things. Kijakazi told lawmakers that this staffing shortage absolutely contributes to these overpayments that we're talking about, given the record number of beneficiaries that SSA now serves. SSA has tried to do something about this staffing shortage. SSA last year hired about 7,800 employees, but once you factor in retirements and people leaving the agency only really felt a headcount growth of 3,200 employees. So overall, SSA has a workforce of about nearly 60,000 employees overall. But despite those best efforts here, the agency now has to put a hiring freeze on additional hires in overtime, as it's now in fiscal 2024, and it's under a continuing resolution. So it doesn't quite know what its budget resources are going to be long term. And so they've had to put that pause on workforce growth for the short term. And here's Kijakazi on that.
Given attrition over the course of the year, if we have level funding, we will have a hiring freeze, which means we cannot replace the people who leave. And so we will begin that decline in our staffing once again.
All right. So what about that funding for the agency in fiscal 2024? Is it going to remain flat, or are they going to be operating on a percentage like a lot of agencies have to in a CR?
Well, it remains a little uncertain at this point because the House and the Senate remain pretty far apart on what overall spending deal for the rest of this fiscal year would look like. The Senate has by and large agreed to the debt ceiling negotiations from earlier this year, which would kind of feel like a CR for the rest of the fiscal year. It would cap non-defense discretionary spending, of which SSA would be part of that. But the House lawmakers, they've considered cuts to SSA funding as severe as 30%. Kijakazi says neither of those are great options. They want budget growth, not a flat budget. But she did tell lawmakers that a 30% cut, something of that magnitude, would force the agency to make some pretty tough choices.
But if we receive a cut of that magnitude, what would happen is that many of the offices in your districts would have to close. We would not have the staff to be able to operate those offices or the funds available to pay for the rent for those offices.
And that is SSA Acting Commissioner Kololo Kijakazi.
All right, so what more could SSA be doing to stop these improper payments? Because this can't be a fun process for them either.
No, and it's obviously a situation where it's tough for SSA to walk up to Congress hat in hand and ask for more money when it is dealing with this kind of problem of this scale. Of course, there are some self-help things that SSA can be doing on its own here. Congress about 8 years ago gave SSA new authority to enter into information exchanges with payroll data providers, because at this point, SSA on the disability side of things for its benefits there, it relies on beneficiaries to self-report their earnings, and there's a certain income threshold for individuals with disabilities to receive SSI payments and other payments of that nature. At this point, SSA has not made use of that authority. It's not in place. It's not in a place where it can get that data from third-party providers to make sure that the payments that they're issuing, they're going to people who are eligible. Kijakazi says that there is some work in progress there, that SSA is finalizing a notice of proposed rulemaking, and that should be done by the end of this calendar year. So optimistically, what we could see is early next year, in calendar year 2024, SSA begin to put this authority to good use.
There's a lot of uncertainty in Congress right now, but any update on how much longer this will fall on Kijakazi, and if former Maryland governor and presidential candidate Martin O'Malley will be confirmed anytime soon?
That's a great question, Eric. It's at this point pretty unclear because we have yet to see O'Malley receive a confirmation hearing. He is, in fact, President Joe Biden's pick to permanently lead SSA. Kijakazi has been holding down the fort for some time now. So really uncertain whether we'll see that permanent leadership step in anytime soon.
Well, he's got his work cut out for him. Federal News Network's Jory Heckman, thank you so much as always.
Thanks, Eric.
And you can find more of Jory's reporting on this and other topics at federalnewsnetwork.com.